So let us start chapter 22, verse 17. If a person is a witch, she cannot live. So I was thinking a lot about this because you say, okay, you have to put the witch to death. And this idea that a witch has to be put to death, first of all, there are witches. One time I was taking a class in City College when I was 20 years old. Here I am, a student at Yeshiva University. I never been outside of Jewish. I've never the only frame of reference I had as an educational institution was Jewish. I never studied even in a co-ed institution, let alone a non-Jewish institution. So I go into City College, and there is this summer class, and I was the only white person in the class, and I wanted to broaden my mind a little bit, so I took this class on witchcraft and uh, sorcery, magic, anthropology, right? So I thought it'd be interesting, right? And I'm glad I did it. And the professor started off the class by saying, "Okay, let's see. Why do you guys want to take this class? Who here is a witch?" And like 7 or 8 women raised their hands, and I'm like, "Whoa!" I had no idea, but it says in the Bible, what? What? City College. My father, when I went there, my father said, I went there back when it was a good school. But I thought it was a good school. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. I thought that I learned a lot. I learned a lot from that semester. I learned a lot from my fellow students. They were very hardworking. A lot of them were immigrants and looking for a place to study. And I thought it was great. I don't think I'd want to go there for a full degree, but the point is, for those 2 classes I took, I remember them to this day. So but then I was thinking, like, the idea that witches should die, which is what the Torah is telling us here. This was something going on in America, right? There was isn't that what the Salem witch trial? And it's probably, I'm guessing, to this day there are societies where they accuse you of being a witch and they put you to death. I don't know enough. I mean, I don't study other societies, but I would guess that it's still going on.
Except for
Oh, Victor, my dear friend, I'm so glad you're here today. The Torah gives the death penalty to a lot of books, a lot of sins. Like, basically, you sneeze the wrong way, you're going down. Now, to be sure, the Torah has a lot of things. You curse your father, you put to death. You curse and there's so many things that you put to death. I'm curious if we Google, but I would guess it's easily more than 50. But the in actual practice, the Talmud comes along and makes it almost impossible to put anybody to death through the judicial system. And really, I don't think that it ever happened. And the Talmud says if anybody is executed once in 70 years, the court is called a murderous court. So the Talmud kind. Whoa. So what I said is, through the halachic system, through the judicial system, there are. Uh, Let me finish. The court, the Talmud, which tractate we're studying now, which is called Sanhedrin, does know about people who are executed in what's called emergency situations, Horah Shah, extrajudicial situations, where they say, we're not going to follow the laws of the rabbis and the Torah here. This is such an incredible situation. We need to go beyond it. Like they declare martial law or something like that. Like they say beyond the law. And in fact, the Talmud does record the position of Shimon ben Shetach, who executed, I forgot how many witches in one day. Might have been like 70, or you could look it up in the Talmud. Shimon ben Shetach, how many witches did he execute in one day? He disguised. These witches were all living in a like a convent, and he went in and he arrested them all, and he hung them on the same day before their families could come and do witchcraft. So they know of executions, but not using the traditional system. It's just like a national emergency. You had to act immediately.
I think you have to check this. Certainly at the time of Jesus. Even in his case, he was convicted by it.
Well, the Talmud.
Because he was a Roman citizen, they couldn't execute him, so they turned him to the Romans to do the job. But his brother was executed by the same thing stolen. So these were numerous cases.
So if you want to talk about like the historical works, that's different than the rabbinic works. According to the rabbinic practice, according to the, basically, if you want to say what there are other courts that were not following rabbinic law, perhaps. I'm not. I can't speak to that. I'm just saying that if you follow the rabbinic of the Tractate Sanhedrin, you'll see that it's almost impossible to happen, and they almost never done. Like, for example, just to give you would have to warn the person with two witnesses the second before they did the action. The person has to say, "Yes, I know if I do this, I'm going to be executed," and then continue to do it. And they like create such implausible scenarios. But anyway, in many cases, it's a theoretical punishment, but it's on the books. A witch is a witch. So that's today's tractate. They talked about different things that they have to do specifically to be convicted of sorcery or witchcraft. You know the story about Houdini and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle? You know about this? Okay, I can mention it to you because it gives me an opportunity to mention the name of our dear friend Bradley Fields of blessed memory. Bradley got me into studying about Houdini. Houdini spent his father came over to be a rabbi in Minnesota and then to Milwaukee. And Houdini's father was an Orthodox rabbi. Bradley got me into him. And Houdini was a big fan of Maimonides. And Maimonides was obviously didn't believe in this idea that you could talk to the dead. And after Houdini's mother died, Houdini was crushed. And he was very close with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the author of Sherlock Holmes. And Sir Arthur Conan Doyle said, "Oh, don't worry, I can arrange for a medium to come and talk to you." Now, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was a big believer in mediums. This person who they got was like a two-bit magician who thought that they could fool Houdini. And of course, Houdini saw right through them. And then Houdini spent the rest of his life trying to expose these charlatan mediums. And it came to a very big, very, very big public fight with Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Very big fight. And most of the people in the world were with Arthur Conan Doyle. They believed that there were mediums. Who did I cut off? I just cut off somebody. Oh, sorry, Shasha. Yeah.
A lot of the things that condemned to death
Yeah.
are things that they chose to do, kill somebody. Is a witch considered to be born that way? May or may not be fault, or is it something that one chooses to be like or something else?
No, it's definitely something that one chooses to do. You have to do an action. You have to do an action. And the Talmud discusses today that you bring up cases where you bring up somebody from the dead and you have them speaking from your underarms or like speaking to you in this manner. Like the Talmud definitely views it not as something, oh, this person's a witch, but they have to see you doing an action. Seeing and doing an action. And in almost all cases, just moving your lips or bowing down is not an action. You have to do an actual action. It's not like, oh, we accuse you of being a witch because bad things happen around you. That is not. The Talmud is actually very, now I understand the Talmud, today's Talmud, based upon what Shoshana is asking me. Because in most societies, they would just accuse you of being a witch based upon rumor or innuendo and not actually have witnesses viewing you doing certain acts. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Mordechai. So good to study with you. And be warned once before he commits the act in front of two witnesses. Yeah. And he has to do it right away. And he has to know the exact penalty. Yeah. For everything, any punishment that you're going to get, you need to be warned right beforehand. You need to acknowledge the warning, and then you need to do the action immediately. So that's what I say. It's like almost impossible for a person to be convicted. And no circumstantial evidence. It's and not only that, with all that, they just go through incredible. Like the only way you could start a judgment of a case was you had to start by arguing for his innocence. And if the entire court ruled to convict, then he went innocent. There are all these rulings that tried to prevent. Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik, who was the brother of Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, he was a teacher. He was the person who was Messiah Kedusha at my parents' wedding. He was a great rabbi. And I remember when I was a young boy, maybe not a young boy, maybe I was like 15 or 16 years old, and George Pataki was running for governor of New York. Remember him? Who remembers George Pataki? I don't even know what happened to him, and he's still alive. But anyway, George Pataki was running and against Mario Cuomo. Mario Cuomo was an incredibly popular governor, at least in my mind when I was a teenager. But he lost the election he didn't want to do the death penalty. He was against it. And Pataki said, we're bringing back the death penalty. So they asked, New York Magazine interviewed Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik and said, what do you say? What would you say to Pataki? So I remember with this quote. So Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik said, okay, we're going back 35 years. He said he should have the death penalty like the Torah. It should be theoretically on the books, but never applied. So that's what he said. So that's what I think I think Rabbi Aaron Soloveitchik was saying, the big picture, what the rabbinic Torah approach is to the death penalty, that there should be one theoretically, but never actually applied. That doesn't mean they didn't actually execute people, but that was kind of like an emergency, meaning say urgent situation, not through rabbinics. The rabbis didn't always control the courts. You can imagine that too. So okay. So what does it mean? It says, Rashi says you should die, put to death by court. So the other question, what if they are witches or a sorceress? What about males who are practicing this sorcery? So Rashi says it applies to males and females, but the Torah speaks about the more common case, and that women are more likely to be sorcerers than men. That's what the Sanhedrin says. We're going to get to that in 67a. Okay, so then the next verse is whoever lies with an animal shall be put to death. You would think that you would. So this is called bestiality, and this is something you have to do. I mean, obviously, again, there's the intent. This is the intent. So somebody who lies with an animal is put to death. Rashi says, who's put to death? Both the man and the animal are put to death. So why is the animal put to death? What did the animal do? So the Talmud says something actually the Mishnah says this. Why is the animal put to death? What did the animal do? So the Talmud says this is something like powerful. The reason why the animal is put to death is because if the animal is left alive, they would say, you see that animal? That man was put to death as a result of that animal, and that would bring shame to that man's memory and to the family of that man. And so therefore, for that reason, the animal is put to death. Before an animal is put to death, it has to be judged the same way a man is judged by a court of 23. A court of 23 has to judge to put an animal to death. Okay. Okay. Then it says, okay, so the next verse is, we did this morning. I could share something with you here, very interesting, that we did in today's daf yomi. Zoveach Elohim Yacharam, Bilti LaHashem Levado. One who makes an offering to the gods is going to be destroyed. You can only sacrifice to Hashem alone. So this is the prohibition of what's called shituf, that it's idolatry to say that God has a partner in his task. That's considered idolatry. So now we have a problem. We have a big problem in Latin Christendom. What's the big problem in medieval Latin Christendom? Because it says it says in the Talmud, in today's teaching, it says you're not allowed to cause an idolatrous name to be mentioned. So therefore, you're not allowed to have a business partner with an idolater, because let's say you have to go to court with him, he's going to swear by his idol. So now we have a problem. Let's say assume that the assumption is for this discussion that when the Jews lived in Latin Christendom, Christianity would be considered by rabbinic law to be idolatry. Let's assume that. So now we have an issue. You have to do business with society. So how are they able to do business under these circumstances? How are they able to do business under these circumstances? So Tosfos asked that question. So I mean, anytime you trade or do business with anyone, even if he's not your partner, you could cause him to swear. So Tosfos comes up. Tosfos is writing. We're talking about here like the 12th century medieval France. So Tosfos comes up with the idea, Rabbeinu Tam, that partnership is prohibited for a Jew. Is for one of the ideas that first he says they're not really idolatry. It's just a custom. And really, even though they say we're swearing to Yeshu Anotzri, they really have in mind the same God. That's one answer. Then he says another answer, which is that maybe this idea of partnership is only prohibited for Jews, but not for non-Jews. That non-Jews can believe in this concept of a partnership. And then he comes up with another idea that it's prohibited for non-Jews, but it's not prohibited for a Jew to cause a non-Jew to have this partnership belief. So these are some of the different ideas. But in the end, the upshot is he knew they needed to do business, and you can't function in a society where people, where you're like less than 1% of the society, and you say you can't do business with the 99%. It just doesn't work. So rabbis are very practical people in those days, and they came up with a solution to that issue. Okay, so anyway, I think we have to daven at this point. Let us daven mincha at this point. Yeshua.